Skull and Bones has finally been released after years of development marred by delays and reworks. Originally announced at E3 2017, the title had reportedly already began development in 2013, taking inspiration from and looking to build on Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Over time, this vision had reshaped and shifted from the form to form, eventually landing on the open sea naval tactical pirate title that it is today.
Camp. That is good to hear. We are in need of... Forgive us for being wary. We are at war with the clan of Farah. Those ruffians raid our set. If you are not an agent of the Farah clan, then you are most welcome.
Being live service based, Skull and Bones does not have a heavy, intricate narrative tied to its gameplay. Players begin the adventure shipwrecked in the Indian Ocean before being named captain of a small boat, slowly making a name for themselves and catching the attention of one captain, John Spurlock. With some support behind you, players will continue to build their arsenal, complete missions, and increase their notoriety in the open waters. Aside from Spurlock, players will also meet and run missions for Admiral Rama, and once the quest lines flesh out, players are left to their own devices. There are some other decent NPCs around, and Ubisoft has the opportunity to add more story beats down the line, but overall the story serves as a starting point for Skull and Bones, and should not be taken as the main purpose of the title. Instead, the stories and narratives of the game are tied to your own experiences. Although players find themselves captaining their own ships, the player character is essentially just an avatar. Players can customize their captain's appearance, reflected at outposts, cutscenes, and even on their ships. However, these customizations are for cosmetic purposes only, as the ships represent the player more than the characters do. When landing at outposts, players can walk around as their captain, speak to NPCs, receive quests and bounties, and interact with vendors and the environment as needed. Though this on-foot portion is not as significant, it's still a nice touch, even if the animations and fluidity don't quite match other Ubisoft titles. By the time the game starts, players will have access to a relatively small boat with cannons. As players progress and increase their notoriety and ranks, access to larger ships and types of weapons will be unlocked. The game shines as players receive more freedom to explore the seas, complete quests, and attack other vessels as needed. Players can also team up with others and compete against other pirates. My time was spent sailing the high seas alone, and it was still enjoyable overall. One aspect of gameplay that I had not anticipated was the resource management feature. Resources are acquired for various purposes, such as completing quests and bounties, crafting materials, and building new ships. While you can build new things relatively quickly at the early stages of the game, the requirements down the line do require more. As such, it is recommended that players hoard resources as much as possible starting from the beginning, and remember to send resources to the vault when possible to ensure that you have space on your ships at all times. The resource systems work well overall, but I found it challenging to pick up resources manually as I sailed past them. When you look at the intricacies of Skull and Bones naval combat, you'll find that Ubisoft Singapore put much effort and attention to details into the pirate-based title. While many early battles can be won by brute forcing your way through combat, much more thought has to be put in for future continued success. Various factors such as wind speed, wind direction, ship loadouts, number of enemies, and even location all play a significant role. Aside from in-combat portions, paying attention to your distance from an outpost is essential. Being too close to an outpost might allow enemies to retreat easier, while being too far from an outpost might mean more enemies coming after you post-combat. Skull and Bones is a visual delight from the details of the ship and the open world sea, as there are some high-quality visuals here that make sailing a joy. Different aspects such as visual cues of the ocean waves, wind, and even the boat's perspectives lend themselves to the overall immersion. Now, while that all works, it can be challenging to determine what faction a ship is from without scanning them, or whether attacking them is in the correct interest of a particular mission. Likewise, there are various locations that players can interact with or plunder, but cannot actually disembark from. While there may be story reasons or limitations for doing so, some of these locations would be interesting to explore on foot. The game also features a store where you can spend currency on boats, crews, and captain aesthetics. It's clarified that the cosmetics are purely for visual purposes only and don't do anything to provide a competitive advantage during gameplay, which is always a nice touch. There's a pretty nice in-universe aesthetic available as you progress through the game, but the cosmetic store provides more options for those in it for the long haul. Skull and Bones is a decent experience requiring some longer-term analysis. As a live service title, I'm afraid I have to disagree with the price point, but I expect that the development cost factored heavily into it. Despite that, Skull and Bones has the potential to enter a golden age of piracy if it manages to usher in a wealth of new players. At its core, Skull and Bones is a fun tactical ship experience, but it needs a lot of work here if it wants to succeed. Noisy Pixel is giving Skull and Bones a 6.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.